This is the making of the John Batchelor Show, and my colleagues are here to help me put together what I regard as a recipe for carrot soup. None of that sausage metaphor. We will address the European matters and the American European matters thanks to the guidance of Judy Dempsey, senior scholar for the Carnegie Endowment for International Peace. Judy is in Berlin, and my colleague and co-host Thaddeus McCotter of American Greatness, former member of Congress. He is in a suburb of Detroit, Michigan. Lady and gentlemen, I begin with headlines at the Reuters for European matters. We have an election underway in Hungary. A far-right party is on course for parliament, following the trend in many of the European Union membership that what is described as a far-right party emerges with a credible presence in the parliament. We also have alarming headlines about Europe again because of NATO. NATO's Rudy says reaching deal to end war will require tough choices. And then NATO's Rudy to meet Zelensky in Kyiv. And then Russia pounds Ukrainian energy facilities before peace talks. And then Russia is ready for new world with no nuclear limits, a senior diplomat says. Russia, Russia, Russia. We will turn to other matters, including the now louder than whispering voices in the United Kingdom's parliament, especially by Labour, saying it is time to admit that the Brexit was an experiment that did not come to success, and that we need to seek an opportunity to rejoin the EU. That is news, loud whispering news. But I begin with the headlines from Ukraine because we march to the sound of guns. Judy and Thaddeus, a very good day to you. I will begin recording immediately with your permission. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. I'm John Batchelor. I welcome Thaddeus McCotter, American Greatness, my colleague and co-host, and we're very pleased to usher in to our conversation Judy Dempsey, a senior scholar for the Carnegie Endowment of International Peace. Judy is in Berlin. She's a veteran journalist of the FT and other distinguished publications, has traveled all of the EU and the Middle East, but right now we're concentrating on the EU because of headlines, again, that suggest we're at a critical juncture in the Ukrainian war that has beggared the people of Ukraine, burdened the people of Eastern Europe, and is a constant quandary for the leaders of the EU and of NATO at the same time. Judy, a very good day to you. I come to two headlines in particular. NATO's, led by a man named Rutte, the general secretary, he is meeting President Zelensky in Kyiv, again in Kyiv. However, the headline that gains the most attention on Reuters is NATO's Rutte says reaching deal to end war will require tough choices. This promises that there are negotiations underway. What is your measure right now of the European Union's posture towards the Ukrainian conflict? Is it seeking a success, or is the status quo dominating? That is, the war continues. Good day to you, Judy.
Good day, John, and good day, Thaddeus. Thank you for having me on your show. It's a very complicated question. Firstly, this time of year, there are an awful lot of security conferences, whether it's in Norway, whether it's in Lithuania, in Latvia, and the focus is on Ukraine. And there's no doubt about it that the northern tier of the European Union are right behind Ukraine, and so is Germany, so is France, so is Britain. The Southerners have always been not lukewarm, they've gone on board, but they have a different concept of threats. But the status quo in terms of supporting Ukraine still prevails. And certainly the capitals, the big capitals that we mentioned, and the Baltic states, they're not pushing Ukraine to make a compromise. Actually, they are wondering what actually President Putin is going to put on the table, besides his mantra that he's not going to make any concessions and he wants a part of the territory of Ukraine. So it's a stalemate. Actually, it's not a stalemate. It's still a war of aggression, given what Russia is doing. And this is ahead of the talks that will take place tomorrow between Russian, American, and Ukrainian diplomats. Not much hope that anything concrete will come out of it, but one never knows.
I mentioned, Judy, last week we had the odd news from the President of the United States himself in a cabinet meeting that he had had a conversation with Vladimir Putin, and there was agreement to stop the barrages against major energy sources in Ukraine, leaving the capital and major cities in Ukraine in darkness without heat. And yet here we have again the headline this morning: Russia pounds Ukrainian energy facilities before peace talks, as if that conversation last week, I didn't dream it. I checked that it was a headline, breaking news headline. Did you have that same headline in Berlin? Was there an explanation from the German government as to how the president characterized the moment as a ceasefire that did not happen?
Actually, the European capitals and leaders inside the European Union don't believe him. And there's been so many broken promises, and it didn't really make the headlines. It was part of a story. And allegedly, President Trump asked for a week-long truce or ceasefire. And, come the night of the 30th, 31st of January and the 1st of February, pounded again the infrastructure. And not only that, but buses were attacked carrying miners from some of the mines in eastern Ukraine. A train was last week attacked carrying passengers. And the point is that no matter what President Trump wants to say to President Putin, or feels he has to say, there's no pressure on President Putin to let go, especially in this extraordinary cold weather. And this is a war of attrition in some ways, and he wants to cow the Ukrainians into submission, but they're not bowing to this kind of pressure at the moment, despite the appalling suffering and deprivation that's going on across Ukraine.
Thaddeus, you have a comment or question for Judy.
Yes, Judy, I remember early on there was talk that this would be a rapid operation for the Russians. The Ukrainian resolve and courage has clearly proven that to be false. But is there not a problem to a certain extent, especially with some of the other countries, that the longer this goes on, the more it seems a part of normality to some of these countries, that they just start to live with it and expect that the stalemate is good enough? That's one of my concerns, is that eventually, other than those necessarily that are going to be pressured by the Russians, that they will just accept this and just continue the status quo without any real pressure for moving towards peace.
Well, accepting the status quo it reminds me of, accepting the status quo between Israel and Palestine, this long running conflict. That is a very, very long conflict, but I'm not so sure that it's got to accepting the status quo, because the capitals, Paris, Berlin, London, and other countries, they do want an end to this war. And Zelensky says he's willing to make some concessions. He hasn't spelt it out because he has to be aware of his own public opinion. And remember, there's going to be elections in several months down the road now in Ukraine. But we're waiting to see the response from Moscow. And there's been no kind of practical response. And in some ways, this actually negates the idea of a status quo. But to answer your question, there is a growing feeling, of course, the capitals want this war to end, but they don't want this war to end with Ukraine defeated, with Ukraine being forced to make concessions, with Ukraine coming to the table beaten into submission by what has been happening over the past 4 years.
Yes, so it's fair to say they do not want peace at any price then.
Peace at a price, but not at a Ukrainian price. There's no doubt about it, Thaddeus. Both sides have to make some kind of concessions. We saw this in Northern Ireland. All sorts of concessions have to be made. But you come to a stage, and I can't judge it from here sitting in Berlin, but there comes to a stage when exhaustion sets in, or one side or the other feels, how much further can we go? But there has to be this kind of sort of psychological sense by both sides. Okay, we have to really be honest and sit down at the table. But the honesty doesn't enter into this system or this equation. And this is what bothers the countries in the European Union. And this is what bothers Ukraine, that actually there is no kind of concrete response by Putin except conquer and in for the long haul.
There's so many tables for negotiation right now, I can only offer a partial list. We have the table that is on again, off again for the Russia-Ukraine conflict or Russia-NATO conflict, depending on your point of view. We have a table somewhere in Lebanon about Hezbollah. We certainly have a table in Cairo and Qatar for Hamas. We have a table in Damascus for the Kurds and what passes for government in Damascus. And we have a new table, Judy, since we last talked. The table is said in headlines to be the U.S. and Tehran, Iran, the Islamic Republic of Iran. You see the reporting that there's a large fleet, air fleet and naval fleet, gathered on the imminent order of the president to prepare for conflict with Iran. Now we're told there are negotiations underway. This is something that the Iranians are very good at. It's called the bazaar. You go in to buy a rug and you wind up paying the price that the seller wants, not the one you want. However, Europe is part of this as well because of the JCPOA in 2015. Is there time enough for Europe to address this matter now? Is the European Union involved in whatever passes for a negotiation between Mr. Trump, who is, as you indicated earlier, not a reliable interlocutor for tables talks, and the Islamic Republic, which is led by a man equally as intransigent and non-transparent as Mr. Trump, the Ayatollah? What is the general opinion in Berlin, Judy?
Well, the general feeling in Berlin and indeed across the EU is twofold. One is the European Union was far too slow to react to the killings that took place over the past several weeks, just simply far too slow. Secondly, they were far too slow to deem the Revolutionary Guard a terrorist group, as if they hadn't been like this for several years. And the third thing is the Europeans really are not involved in this. But it's not only the American show. What is very important about this so-called show of strength, it goes up and down by the Trump administration, is the role of Qatar. It's the role of Saudi Arabia. The Middle East countries play an extraordinarily important role, much more than the Europeans. And in fact, they are the ones that can put the pressure on Trump. Whether they can put the pressure on Iran, this is another matter. But probably they can, actually, because the leadership in Tehran is absolutely not united, given what has happened over the past couple of weeks and given what Trump may be doing or he's threatening to do. But at the end of the day, it's the Middle East countries that really, really play an enormously important strategic role.
Thaddeus, you have a comment or question for Judy on Iran?
Yes, Judy, when you talk about the leadership may be divided, can you go into that a little bit about the divisions within the Iranian leadership?
Yes. Well, we have the supreme leader who shows no sign of compromising, but we have on the just the level below him, we have seen attempts to actually try to reach out to, how would you call it, the Iranians themselves, and there's been promises maybe of releasing some of the names and so on. There was a really dreadful, not a cartoon, but a show one or two nights ago on Iranian television, mocking the corpses. You know, where will you put them? Will we put them into a fridge or a shop or wherever? It was very, very hurtful, and it really incensed Iranians across the board on what was happening. And I think the regime now feels there could be another outburst of just so disgust with the population about how the dead have been treated, how the injured have been treated, how there's no transparency, how there's no access to the dead or to the lists who've been injured. And so the reformers are sort of trying to weigh up how far they can go, but the supreme leader at the moment shows no sign of weakening. And so these tensions at the top level will be interesting to monitor. But, we have to also see how the Iranian society, if they've been really suppressed so much that they won't take to the streets again. But this is far from over.
Judy Dempsey from the Carnegie Endowment for International Peace. She's in Berlin. Thaddeus McCotter of American Greatness. He is in Michigan, Detroit. And we're going to turn to a matter that we all three have acknowledged as distasteful, but it's crowded into the European Union politics now because of the involvement of the United Kingdom and also the intention or the indication from the United Kingdom's overwhelming majority in Parliament to seek to rejoin the EU. This is the Epstein matter. When we come back, I'm John Batchelor. I'm John Batchelor with my good colleagues, Thaddeus McCotter of American Greatness, my co-host and colleague, and Judy Dempsey in Berlin for the Carnegie Endowment for International Peace. She's a veteran journalist. I apologize immediately because of this is distasteful. It's about Epstein. But the matter comes to fore because of a man named Mendelsohn, who was appointed by the present overwhelming majority in Parliament to be the UK ambassador to the United States before revelations of his unacceptable conduct with regard to Epstein and the young people who were exploited by Epstein over many years. This is a vast demonstration of human vice, and I do not characterize it any more than that. But I do say that this is crowding into governmental decision-making, not just private banks like Goldman Sachs, not just private world-scale organizations like Meta, for heaven's sakes, and Microsoft dancing with these characters. I have no simple way to put it other than the fact that Epstein resembled, and I was telling Thaddeus and Judy before we started, it reminds me of a 1941 movie called The Devil and Daniel Webster, a story by Stephen Vincent Benet, in which the devil buys the soul of a simple farmer who's having bad luck, gives him lots of money and opportunity, and then one day in future comes to collect the soul, something you don't bother with, you don't care about it, it doesn't weigh anything. And the man doesn't want to go with him because by giving up his soul, he's headed to Hades. Daniel Webster enters, the great interlocutor of the moment, and argues before a jury of pirates and cutthroats and mass murderers to get our farmer off. It's a fascinating movie. I recommend it to everyone, but I only bring it up because I need to be lighthearted about this matter. It's so damaging to talk about Epstein. Judy, it's Mendelsohn. He's a major political figure in the United Kingdom. He had clearly international status. That's why Starmer named him to be ambassador. He reaches back to the Gordon Brown era before the UK left the EU, and now there's talk of rejoining the EU. Do you make sense of this, Judy? Is it a boys' club in Parliament? Or do I speak of them in a fashion that makes sense to someone who's witnessed them for many decades?
We have to disconnect the role of Peter Mandelson with the whole discussion about Britain's relationship with the European Union. There's no doubt that Mandelson is making the names now, top of the headlines in the British media, and Keir Starmer, the British Prime Minister, is suggesting that maybe he should stand before a court or whatever. And there's all sorts of meddling by Mendelsohn with Epstein, and not betraying secrets, but informing Epstein about what to do with certain tax conditions in the United Kingdom. It's an extraordinary relationship that just unfolds, and there seems to be no end to this kind of connection between Mandelson and Epstein. But that's one basket. But the other basket is something fundamental and enduring, and this is going to be the future of Britain's relationship with the European Union. Having left the European Union under extraordinary false pretenses that everything would be fine, and this was ex-Prime Minister David Cameron who had this referendum, and the Brexiteers lost. And now they realise, actually, Great Britain economically is in very bad shape. Its trade is in very bad shape. Its relationship with the United States is in very bad shape. Yes, it can have bilateral relations, trade relations with India and other countries, but fundamentally, given what's happening in the transatlantic relationship, given what's happening in terms of geopolitical security, there's a growing not a consensus, but growing voices within the Labour Party, the governing Labour Party, that maybe it's time to reconsider what kind of relationship Britain could have in terms of rejoining the European Union. This is a big, big shift. And now it's up to the Prime Minister if he has the courage to speak out and say Brexit was a mistake.
Thaddeus, you have a comment or a question? We have a couple of minutes.
Yeah, well, Judy, with Brexit, wasn't the overriding concern about the European Union's ability to control some aspects of domestic UK law, not necessarily the overall economic engagement? It was more of the interference in domestic legislation. Is that about right?
I think that's a great point. Take control back, and I mean some other parties in the European Union, far right-wing parties, say take control back. But of course, they don't want to leave the EU because of the benefits. But now, under Brexit, yes, they got their control back. They got their sovereignty back in terms of competition policy and trade policy, judicial elements and so on, legal elements. But now, what does this mean? They're left alone. Without any kind of recourse to the internal market in the European Union. So take control back became very much empty words, an empty slogan, and now it's coming home to haunt the British public and the British government.
Judy Dempsey is a senior scholar for the Carnegie Endowment for International Peace. She is in Berlin. Thaddeus McCotter, American Greatness, a former member of Congress. He is in Detroit, Michigan. This is very carefully touching upon a subject that will grow and grow over the next months, which is the United Kingdom seeking to rejoin the EU. I'm John Batchelor. All done making carrot soup. Thank you, Judy. Thank you.
Carrot soup. I like it.
Sausage never occurred to me to eat, but carrot soup I like a whole lot. So I decided if I'm going to choose a metaphor for a menu, I should choose something I like that I actually eat.
And I agree in that, yes.
The Epstein matter is growing much, much worse. Much worse. It's very, extremely damaging, and it gets worse. This morning... It's not damaging for the moment for you know who. I mean, yeah. They focus on Andrew, they focus on the Norwegians, they focus on Goldman Sachs. I mean, 3 million documents. I mean, you wonder. It's just very difficult to know. Well, this morning we have news that the Clintons are now in the game.
Yes.
Because of a negotiation over testimony that is going to be characterized variously as dodging, and it's going to involve the former prince, Lordy Judy. Oh.
Yeah.
Yeah, I don't want to summarize. I don't have to summarize.
No.
And Thaddeus, you know, Congress, once they get their hands on someone with that subpoena power, there's no letting go. Do you agree, Thaddeus?
Well, it depends. They start off and then the headlines fade and then they fade. And we'll see what happens. Right now, this is the hot one. We'll see what happens down the road. It's heading into a midterm election, so if there's political benefit to it, either side, they'll pursue it until it's no longer politically beneficial to them.
And I didn't take up the fact that the president's word is untrustworthy. I didn't take that up, Judy, because it's self-evident now. I don't know how to deal with that story. Nothing he says is reliable.
I think there is. I was thinking of this. Leaving aside what everybody thinks of Trump, he's extremely skillful in distracting. So when there's one crisis, whether it's Minnesota or whether it's what the ICE is doing or whether it's Iran or whether Ukraine, he shifts the media onto something else. when things get a little bit tricky for him. I mean, the ICE is still very big, but he's when there's a problem, shift the emphasis to somewhere else and make the media run after him and this new problem or this new issue. And so it demands a strong editorial judgment and a strong editor, a news editor, foreign editor, editor generally, to say, we're focusing on this, you focus on this, we're not going to just run after one issue. Keep our focus on ICE, keep our focus on, now they want to federalize the voting polls or whatever it's called. And you have to have a big news desk to keep a handle on all these issues. And that's something that Trump doesn't want. He wants the news desk just to run after the latest issue because this will sell news. Trump, follow me is Trump's mantra.
And it works.
Yeah.
It works for the biggest news desk we have.
Yeah.
Thaddeus, have you seen I just throw this in because I saw it for the first time last night, a candid statement that Trump is going to cancel the midterms. Have you heard this, Thaddeus?
Sometimes it just boggles the mind, the stuff that people come up with to make themselves miserable. So Trump's enemies have a way of engaging in Trumpian paranoia that they indulge it to their own detriment.
Yeah.
Myself, I was too busy reading Tim Pat Coogan's book on the Troubles. I was finishing that this week. Now, if you want to be miserable, go read about Northern Ireland. But not since 1998. It got better. Although the book ended in 96.
Judy's a Dubliner. How is Dublin with the UK rejoining? Are they in favor of the UK rejoining and stopping all this fuss about a hard border? Is that a positive?
The hard border is over. That's been resolved. I mean, the Irish government, by the way, Ireland is holding what's called the 6-month rotating presidency of the European Union. That starts in July, but they got their plates full. But no, I mean, they would be quite happy if Great Britain joined the European Union, actually. And so would Poland, so would the Baltic states. The Great Britain carries quite an awful lot of weight it did carry an awful lot of weight inside the European Union. Things have changed so much now that right. the British voice in terms of intelligence and security and as a nuclear power is needed all the more.
I agree, but is Starmer the man to deliver, given the turmoil in labor? I read from the outside because I haven't read of that parliament for my whole life the way you can if you're in the system, and I don't know how to read it. Starmer has that enormous majority, but it doesn't come to anything.
Politics is so short-term now. It's just 24 hours, 48 hours, moving from one crisis to the other. Long-term strategic thinking and forecasting and planning is just, it's not in the vernacular. Now it's living from day to day, which distracts policy making.
It's time to put some teeth back in the House of Lords.
Ladies and gentlemen, I want to introduce a colleague of mine who's coming on next, Judy, and then we'll get you back to your day in Berlin.
Yeah.
David, a very good morning to you. I want to introduce my two good colleagues, Judy Dempsey of the Carnegie Endowment for International Peace. Judy, David is a colleague who has many years in service for various administrations, the last being the acting director of the Defense Intelligence Agency. He's got a new book out about espionage and Chinese bad actors in the American system. David, this is Judy. Judy, this is David. And Thaddeus McCotter, former member of Congress. And you've met David. David, you and Thaddeus know each other from a previous, I believe, conversation. If not, we're going to address your book. Good morning to you, David.
Good morning. Delighted to meet you as well, and look forward to this conversation.
Yes, indeed. Judy, thank you for your,
not at all. Next week.
Time today. We see you next week. When
Definitely.
I promise not to bring up Epstein if I can. I promise.
Please don't. Okay. Bye.
Thank you, Judy. Bye. David, you're with us now. This is...
I just lost your sound.
Oh, well, let me see if I get it back. Let me see if you're there, David. Can you hear me now?
Cannot hear you.
Let me see what I did wrong.
Can you hear me? No.
How's
Can you
that?
hear me, John?
How's that, David? Am I back? No, I'm not.
It shows that the host has there we go. Can you hear me?
I do hear you. Do you hear
But
me?
I cannot hear you.
All right, let's see.
Let me log right back in.
Yeah, wonderful. Thaddeus, I'm hearing you perfectly. Well,
Okay,
David,
I'm hearing you as well.
yeah, David.
I was hearing David too.
Yeah, I don't know what I did. I've got to be careful of this prompt. It's dangerous business. Let me make a note about Judy's comments.
The audience gets to see you make your carrot soup.
Yep, you got it.
Oh no, you dropped an onion on the floor. 3-second rule.
No, I have spaniels, and no onion would last long on the floor.
Yeah, that Tim Pat Coogan book ended in 1996, right before the peace process really kicked in. So it was kind of ended on a down note.
Let's get lucky. David, how's that? Are you back? With
Perfect. I'm back and I hear you loud and clear.
I'm not going to touch anything. I'm going to show the cover of your book.
Okay.
And David, I was flabbergasted to see, isn't that your case that you write up this recent conviction?
Mr. Ding? Yes, Ling Wei Ding.
I remember us talking about it either on or off air when we talked. I was flabbergasted at the level of theft that was going on that was not either not noticed or ignored by his employers.
Well, here's the naivete. Having signed any number of non-disclosures and secrecy paperwork and all the rest, he went on to do this. And as John, you remember this case in the book, this is a guy who was three-timing. He was setting up his own company. He was working for the Chinese all the while that he was at Google since 2019.
Yes, quite fantastic entrepreneur. A lot of get up and go, which will probably leave him to be a digital commentator and teacher in prison. I can see him teaching coding.
Exactly.
So we will begin with ex-Google engineer convicted of stealing AI secrets for Chinese companies. That's January 29th last week. Reuters. And we'll explore what this evidence is about our security, about the world's security, and about, as you say in The Great Heist, the People's Republic of China's apparatus, state security, has no motive whatsoever to quit doing what they're doing. It's just, there's no penalty. So we'll begin. 5, 4, thank you, David. 3, this is 2 segments, 19 and a half minutes for tonight. 5, 4, 3. All's well? Sure I'm recording? Looks like I am, but I'm just checking. 5, 4, 3, 2. Looks good. It is indeed recording. 1. I'm John Batchelor. That is McCotter, American Greatness, my colleague and co-host, and we're very pleased to bring on a colleague who has a new book out that can reveal what you all sense is happening all the time, which is intellectual property theft by the People's Republic of China's agents, either hired agents of the Ministry of State Security or freelancers. The book that David and his colleague Andrew Badger have recently published is The Great Heist. This is a story of some of the anecdotes gathered up over the years of the blatant theft and espionage and bad acting by agents of the People's Republic of China. The subtitle, China's Epic Campaign to Steal America's Secrets. It continues. David is a former acting director of the Defense Intelligence Agency and longtime veteran of the intelligence community for different administrations over time. David, the story that I ask immediately your attention is in your book, and then I see it pop up in a headline in these last days. Ex-Google engineer convicted of stealing AI secrets for Chinese companies. This just happened, and he's convicted and he's to be sentenced. What does this illustrate, David, about our vulnerability and about the relationship between Washington and Beijing ongoing because of the trade dispute? Good day to you, David.
Good morning, and it's delightful to be here with you again, John. And thank you for raising this very important topic of China's what, from all appearances, unfettered heist of our intellectual property, know-how, innovation, and data. And there's elements to each one of those. But in the case of Linwei Ding, he was a Google engineer who, I believe it was last Thursday, he was convicted on a number of counts of a second series of indictments. The first one's being in 2024, but this was expanded. A Google engineer who joined Google in 2019, and by 2022, he was a capitalist in his own way, as you say, a freelancer, in which he downloaded or uploaded, I should say, a number of the graphic processing unit designs around what would be enabling to artificial intelligence. Very advanced technology, uploaded it, went on the travel circuit in China, went and delivered to a startup company there. He then stood up his own company at the same time, all the while working for Google. 3 observations very quickly. The first is, no matter what he had done in terms of signing non-disclosure agreements and secrecy agreements with Google, he didn't abide by them. Secondly, Google did not have the security infrastructure in place to capture this in real time when it occurred, but rather subsequently did so afterwards. And thirdly, to Google's benefit, they cooperated with law enforcement in order to bring this case in which he's awaiting his sentencing. But the conviction was very clear and daunting in terms of the technology that Mr. Ding stole during this period of time.
Thaddeus, you have a question for David.
David, first, thank you for your book. I think it's a very timely one. It's information the public needs to hear. The Chinese are engaged in unrestricted warfare against the United States. You would think that it would be easier for big tech, as Google had done in the situation you brought forward, to work with federal authorities to try to find ways to protect intellectual property from the Chinese. And yet, sometimes one of the great ironies is a time of hyper-partisanship where Republicans and Democrats are clinging to their ideology. They do not understand of how the ideology of the Chinese communists actually motivates them and necessitates their stealing of the very technologies you're describing.
Well, this is precisely the underpinning now that we see with the National Intelligence Law of 2017, Article 7, that requires every Chinese citizen and every Chinese business entity, so think about ByteDance and TikTok, even with a 20% ownership, to support the Chinese Communist Party, whether that's done via the Ministry of State Security, their gigantic intelligence and security apparatus, or it's done directly into the CCP. There is a requirement by both the individuals and the business entities to then support the Chinese Communist Party when called upon. It doesn't mean every single Chinese citizen today is a spy. But if they have something that the CCP needs in order to enable, for example, the modernization of the People's Liberation Army or other areas of the economic sector in order to meet and achieve their doubling in growth that Xi Jinping has called for in 2020 by 2035, they must provide that information, that knowledge, that capability, that background, whatever it might be. And Mr. Ding was captured very much in that net as well, even as he was a freelancer.
David, I want to understand the private enterprises that Ding touched and was recruited by and worked for. Google is mentioned repeatedly because that was his employer. and the security at Google and Microsoft and Amazon. Not the question of is it adequate or not. I've become enormously suspicious that they're aware that this is going on, or cannot not be aware, and yet continue on with their activities in any event. Did you get that sense when researching that it was impossible to believe that the employer, given all the access online that Mr. Ding took, that they didn't know what he was up to when he was downloading their secrets?
Look, it is somewhere between naive and really putting your head down in the sand if you believe that a high-tech company like Google would not have the technological means to track an insider threat. I can't say positively, going back to my research, that they looked the other way or thought that nothing was going on in terms of Mr. Ding's activities. But at a minimum, they did not put up the guardrails associated with identifying someone who would be uploading proprietary information, and in the end, extraordinarily sensitive information when it came to the research and development and the advancements of these GPUs in their designs. He stole the designs of the GPUs and the microchips that would enable that in terms of their design. And so when Mr. Ding is caught, it seems as though the fox was always in the hen house, and it's difficult to believe that they couldn't distinguish the chickens from the fox inside the hen house. That said, I can't make a declarative judgment that Google missed it, but it's difficult to believe.
My reading of intelligence surveillance, however, is that there are other things besides what goes on in the digital universe. His travel schedule, going back from California to the People's Republic of China, his familiarity with an early stage Chinese technology company, which may very well be the Ministry of State Security. In any event, there's a digital record of all these things. When I charge something that seems out of line with my ordinary conduct, Morgan Stanley gets in touch with me right away to make sure that it's okay. I mean, that's retail America. It's available to all of them. That means that Google doesn't have the common sense of Morgan Stanley to watch how its employees who have access to secret information, to intellectual property that is extremely valuable, they're not watching his travel schedule.
It's difficult to believe that they would not know his travel schedule if that's in fact data that they wanted to both collect and then have an explanation for it. But here's the problem, John. For far too long, there's been an acceptance that at best, or maybe at worst, China is an economic competitor and not an adversary. So the fact that Mr. Ding would travel to China, maybe he did fill out some forms and say, I'm going to visit family. Naively, Google goes, have a good family vacation and enjoy your time there. What is the naivete or the suppression of the reality is that everyone and everything associated with business has a duty to report to the CCP. In other words, this naivete has gone on far too long, whether it's through the travel or through family relations or through unauthorized contacts with research and developers from China within our high-tech industry. In the intelligence community, just very quickly, we had to report all travel, yes, including to friendly countries, because there was always, and it's always been a part of the modus operandi, that you could go meet your handler in any one of those countries, or worse yet, you might even be approached by someone that then you subsequently don't report, that has a counterintelligence prospective by the adversary in terms of contacting you. So the naivete is there, and I think for far too long we've thought of it as they're just a competitor. What's the big deal? Let's do business with China. They're okay.
We're speaking with David Shedd, who, with his colleague Andrew Badger, have published a new book, The Great Heist, China's Epic Campaign to Steal America's Secrets, just published. And bursting out of the pages is the Ding case. When we come back, is there anything to learn from this, given that we're told we're in a year's pause between Washington and Beijing over trade of all matters, secret and non-secret? Thaddeus McCotter, David Shedd. I'm John Batchelor. I'm John Batchelor with my colleague and friend Thaddeus McCotter, American Greatness, my co-host, and we're very pleased to speak to the author, David Shedd, former acting DIA director, who with former DIA case officer Andrew Badger have a new book out that's upsetting. It's upsetting if you consider that the U.S. is now faced with a existential threat by the People's Republic of China. There's no other way to interpret the events of the last years and the last weeks, for heaven's sakes. Xi Jinping just wiped out his whole general staff. There were 7 people at the table for the military commission commanding life or death for the people of Asia. 5 of them are gone. What's left is Xi and an accountant sitting at the end of the table, whose job was to provide the corruption for firing the other 5, including the major military officer. This is a country we're negotiating with. This is said to be a stable competitor. David, I bring up that extraordinary example because it just happened. What is Google doing? What is Microsoft doing? For heaven's sakes, what is NVIDIA doing? Howling around with a gang that always has a stiletto in its hands.
Well, I mean, it's interesting that you should raise NVIDIA. Now the H200 chips have been approved to the tune of about $10 billion in sales to China. I am deeply concerned by that. They will go into the Huawei advanced telephony world, as well as their AI models. Why are we doing this? Somehow, again, I come back to what I said previously. There is either a naivete about what China will do, notwithstanding what the Great Heist really lays out in terms of the arc, particularly since Made in China 2025 kicked off 10 years ago, now almost 11 years ago, in 2015 under Xi Jinping, the doubling of the Ministry of State Security, a department or Bureau 18 that focuses on the United States that, from my understanding, has unfettered resource access to do the various typhoon cyber attacks and all of that. So why are we thinking of China as this competitor when, in fact, they will take those chips, reverse engineer them, and in the short term, of course, we get $10 billion. Yet on the other hand, we have just given one level, at least, of the keys of the chip kingdom to China through this sale.
Thaddeus, you have a question for David.
Yeah, we saw this with Romania during the Carter years, where a communist country says they're going to be your friend, let's engage in economy, and then they rip you off blind. David, I tend to believe that communist China is a strategic threat and rival model of governance. But the problem is when you have places like Google and other multinational American corporations, they put the blinders on so they can make billions of dollars. And they do everything they can to convince themselves that that's not the case. And that really has hindered the ability of places like Google, and you see it in the instances that you write about, protecting themselves, because in their hubris, they believe that this regime won't do that to us. They need us. Well, they need you until they're done bleeding you for all the information they can, then they move on. Is that about right?
That is correct. And I would give you another vector into the hubris issue. And we see it and saw it with Elon Musk and Tesla in 2019, while Mr. Kao did the $1 billion thumb drive heist of the autopilot for Tesla. And now BYD is well ahead of Tesla in global sales of electric vehicles. And this other angle to hubris is I'll always stay ahead of them. There's almost a sense in my own mind of a jingoistic view. We're smarter, we're better. They see us as these barbarians that come in and do these joint ventures and these sorts of things. And of course, a very appealing market of 1.4 billion people, a sizable middle class to sell to and all the rest. But what they actually ultimately do is they capture, then they cage, and then they kill. The capture is they draw you in, just as you're describing in terms of these multinationals that go in, cheap labor, large manufacturing capabilities, turn it around, I can sell it both to their domestic market and back into our market. Secondly, then comes the caging. Oh, but you can't take any developed IP on the mainland out. You can't take your data out. You cannot, even your profits, you need to put them back into the Chinese economy. And that's the cage part. And then in many instances, not always the case, they do the kill, which is the manufacturer starts down the road or in the adjacent city of the very thing that you brought in because they replicate it. Let's keep in mind that China has somewhere between 28 to 30% of the global manufacturing capability. They need to keep those factories going, and as robotics come online and all the rest. So they are able to take that, turn it around, and we have seen that in the solar panel sector. We've seen it with the green energy overall in terms of literally they now have a monopoly in those areas because of the technology that they stole. And the other aspect of it is they take they bypass the cost that we put into it in research and development because they don't pay for that. They've simply stolen the intellectual property and go straight to manufacturing.
David, your measure right now of these negotiations about a trade deal between the U.S. and China, does it take into account the revelations in your book?
I fear not, for the simple fact that, for the same, in answering the previous question, we have a national hubris that whatever agreement we make, and I think Prime Minister Carney has probably been in the same boat for Canada, and now Prime Minister Starmer from the UK, that somehow we are dealing with a fair trading partner. Well, all of that is belied by the fact that since China joined the World Trade Organization in December 2001, with a $1.3 trillion economy and now somewhere hovering around the 18 to 19 trillion dollar GDP economy in China, is that somehow they will play by the rules. I fear that the administration is much too focused on a transactional relationship with China as opposed to a strategic one, in which there's eyes wide open.
Eyes wide open. I'm sorry. Eyes wide open so that the administration knows that this is dangerous and going ahead anyway.
I love the Reagan line, trust but verify. You go into the relationship knowing full well that their intent is actually to steal your secrets.
The book is The Great Heist, China's epic campaign to steal America's secrets. Right now, the conviction was last week. David Shedd, Andrew Badger, Thaddeus McCotter, my colleague. I'm John Batchelor. Well, talk about making a point. David, it's flabbergasting. Isn't anybody screaming? Nobody?
We're off air, right?
Oh, yes.
So we're not off. We're not off air. We are not off air.
We're off recording. I'm sorry.
But we're not off air.
You don't have to name names. Just tell me, is somebody screaming somewhere?
Someone is screaming, and that's the Select Committee on Intelligence related to China, the Select Committee on China in the House. And yesterday, as I engaged with the staff of the Judiciary Committee in the Senate, they're very much awake to this. And the interesting and very positive thing is that this is truly a bipartisan issue. And I draw the analogy along the lines of Republican, Democrat, Independent, or agnostic, or whatever you might be. No one likes their house stolen. Yeah, no one wants the thief to come into the house and say, go to the upper room to the left there, and that's where all the jewelry is. No one wants that done, yet that's what we're allowing to happen. The question is, are we prepared to identify what we must protect at all costs, and thereby enable the protections around that for those crown jewels, and at all costs we protect that.
Well, David, doesn't the experience with TikTok kind of belie the fact that they will? Because if you think about it, TikTok's really a dual use technology, and it's the most intelligence gathering device ever. It was planted in the United States, it's voluntary, and we couldn't do anything about that.
Well, and you had Congress declaratively saying do something about it. That's been overruled. The fact that its parent ByteDance is in open communication and cooperation with the Chinese Communist Party should tell us something. It is, as you say, the voluntary collection of 170 million TikTok users' data, 1.7 billion globally. We can't do anything about that part of it.
The algorithmic messaging to the users.
And then the more insidious aspect of it is the influence piece. So what clicks, and I'm not a social media guru by any means. I'm not on it for all intents and purposes other than LinkedIn. And I will tell you, the ability to move the hearts and mind issue that the Chinese are looking for on the basis of that data and curated to move the ideal data that the Chinese want to the top is the more insidious piece of just collecting the data.
We just have a couple of minutes, David. Is it your information that the legal teams at the major Silicon Valley corporations have taken into account what you reveal in your book? Or do you hear from them or about them? Are they reading?
Yes, they have taken it on board. The security people have taken it on board, but all too often the security folks, less so the legal teams, but certainly the security people, to pivot your question a bit, are the third tier. It's the office that when the budget comes up short, they take the money from the security people. They don't give it the due attention. And as I point out in the book, chapter 18, with my fictional chapter about the boardroom,
right,
is that security simply doesn't make it to the boardroom. What's interesting is a lot of boards now, publicly and private, have set up risk committees, and that risk committee is almost exclusively focused on cyber, but not insider threat, not the other elements about protecting that intellectual property in other ways that the Chinese could get that knowledge, as opposed to the cyber component of it. So we have woken up by and large to the cyber threat piece, not just from the Chinese, but from bad actors across the board, but not in the same way in terms of the overarching security challenges that companies really need to face up to.
So not the travel schedule of our employees.
Exactly. Yeah.
That
Correct.
was the oldest style surveillance at the CIA. I remember reading about it many years ago.
Of course it was. Of course.
And also, what kind of car you're driving. I mean,
Yes, exactly. Your lifestyle all of a sudden belies the fact that you make $100,000 and you live like a millionaire when you go down to your yacht, that somehow you can't explain.
Is that you I see in Vanity Fair? Okay.
Yes, exactly.
Okay. Now, The Great Heist is the book. I'll show I don't know, it's in exact science. A China's epic campaign to steal America's secrets. The story the CCP does not want revealed. Well, it's revealed. David Shen and Batchelor. Here it is revealed. And one warning, it's very upsetting. And so those of you who have fiduciary responsibility for major publicly traded stocks, you will be upset. You will be. Thank you, David. Thank you, Thaddeus. This is The Making of the John Batchelor Show. Carrot Soup. One more day. Thank you all for listening.